Oh,
This meeting is being recorded.
Okay, great. Good evening, everyone. I'm Senator Mary Washington. Great to see you all, and welcome to our 43rd District pre-session community conversation. I just want to define some of our goals tonight, and we talked about having this as a discussion. So we're going to be doing some reporting, of course, but we want to make sure that you understand that this is a discussion, as well. First, one of the things I guess we could get into making sure that everyone has their mic off if you're listening. So first, I want to do a little bit of, go to the next slide. We'll do a little bit of a Zoom etiquette and community standards. I'm sure we've all been using Zoom, but just a little bit of a reminder. Please mute your microphone when you're not speaking. Also, please be mindful if there's any background noise. If your camera's on, please note that this meeting is being recorded, so you can also share it later. And raise your hand. You can use the raise hand function. If you're not quite comfortable with that, please put a little note in the chat window. All of our suggestions that we have is to make sure that we have a smooth and productive discussion. We're using this Zoom platform to facilitate free and open exchange of your thoughts and your ideas. We care deeply about you, our constituents, both in this virtual environment as well as in the physical environment. So we want to make sure that we are free from any harassment or any language that's inappropriate. And if you see someone who's using inappropriate language or gestures, please alert us. At some point, we will lock the meeting. There's been some Zooming coming in and disrupting of meetings all over. I'm sure some of you have participated in some of those. So we're just going to make sure that that doesn't happen by closing the meeting after a certain point. Next is our little bit of our agenda so that you know about the flow of the meeting. First is our welcome, which is, what I was doing. We're doing some greetings and introductions. We'll introduce ourselves and our staff. We also want to recognize the service of some of our colleagues briefly. We're also going to do a community roll call. So we're asking everyone, all the attendees, if you're representing an organization, please write your name, your title, and any contact information you have in the chat. We want to make sure we have an opportunity to let others know that you're here. Then we're going to have an interim report. We're going to tell you about some of the highlights of things that have happened over the interim, both within the Senate office and the delegate's office, as well as some larger issues. And then you see our session update, and then the constituent comments. You'll see that we've divided the meeting essentially into thirds. Sort of a general welcome and greeting and some information, then our reports, and then a significant amount of time for you to contribute, add ideas, ask us questions, and we'll be open to questions along the way. So before I get started, are there any questions thus far? So to make sure, I'll look in the chat. I don't see anyone's name in the chat yet, so please, there we go. Enter your name and your affiliation so that we can recognize you when the time comes. All right, next slide. Okay, that's me. Mary Washington, state senator. I'm so excited to be entering my second term as the state senator. This is the contact information for my office. Also, we are opening a district office. You'll see the address there at 5820 York Road. We're hoping in a month or so, or maybe some point in session, we'll have an open house. But right now we're just focused on session. I also would like to introduce you to my staff. If we can go to the next slide. Got a brand new staff, a brand new term, brand new staff. You have Carissa Matern. She's the chief of staff. She's, again, if any of you have been reaching out to the office since August, that's who you've been speaking with. And then brand new to our office as of October is Melanie. She's our legislative and constituent affairs coordinator. Also, there's our contact information. You know, great. We have so many people here. This is so great. Okay, so next, I am so honored and excited to pass the mic on to the good delegate, Regina T. Boyce.
Good evening. I am so glad to see you all here on a Monday night. We are happy to be here with you. I am Delegate Regina T. Boyce of District 43A. I have to get used to saying that. And I am supported by Leslie Gray, my legislative aide, who's been my aide for a year now. So when you contact my office, if you don't speak to me directly, you usually will speak to her. And the best way to contact me, and especially during session, is by phone here, the 410-841-3476, as well as my regina.boyce at house.state.md.us. We get a lot of emails during session. So if somehow we miss you, feel free to call or reach out again, but we don't purposely miss anyone. So thank you so much, and I look forward to our evening conversation. And I'm going to pass the mic, I believe, to our newest delegate, Delegate-Elect Elizabeth Embry.
Hello, everyone. This is my first community conversation with my new team, and I'm really excited to be part of this amazing team. So I was just elected for the first time. I'm joining Delegate Boyce in 43A and part of the larger 43 with Senator Mary Washington. I am brand new, so I don't have an official email yet, and I don't have an official phone number. So what I have included in the slide is my personal cell phone number and my personal email address, and you're welcome to continue using them at any point, but I will be putting out my official contact information once I receive it. So just very excited to be here, and thank you all. Oh, and I'm sorry, and I am in the process of interviewing for staff. So I will hopefully have staff I can introduce very soon. Thank you. And I will turn it back over.
And so, great. So before, I don't believe they're on. I don't know if Delegate McIntosh is on, but we wanted to, or Delegate Anderson, I mean, they're busy continuing to do good work and being with family this time of year. But we, Special Delegate Boyce and I wanted to make sure, as well as everyone, that we just spend a second to recognize our colleagues, Delegate Maggie McIntosh and the good delegate from our district, Delegate Kurt Anderson. So next slide. We did sort of there we go. So we put together just a little collage, just some photos. Some of you just might recognize some of them over the years. But again, I have so much enjoyed being a part of the team, starting in 2010 and for the last 12 years. And again, continue to look forward to seeing all that the good delegate will do. I believe delegate, and then next, at the next slide, just is a quick little picture over the years of our good Kurt Anderson. You can never have a slide with the good delegate Kurt Anderson without mentioning Morgan Bears, which is up there, that photo of his lacrosse team, him then campaigning, advocating as he always did. He was wonderful on the floor to speak up and call out injustice, and he's just been such a wonderful colleague and advocate. So now our next is to pass on. We're going to talk a little bit about our interim update, and the The interim is that period. So when we're in the legislative session, we're there from January through April, right? 90 days. And we're there 24/7, out very long hours, working and advocating on your behalf. We also work lots of hours and time during the interim. That's when we're home. So from essentially May to December. So this year, we thought that we'd give you a little flavor of what that looks like during the interim, and giving you a little more of a report out. In terms of a big picture, the big issues was Maryland redistricting, right? And the general election ballots, our ballot initiatives. So first, we got a new map. And that is required under our Maryland General Assembly, and we adopted a new map. And that's the map that we all ran under. Each legislative district, just so that you know, and that's the entire legislative district there, is about 131,000 residents. Okay, so that's the size of the senatorial district, or electing 3 delegates at large, which is what we have always done, or we've done at least the last 20 years. And when districts are divided into single member districts or 2-member House districts, the size of those sub-districts are about 87,000 people to about 40,000 people. So next slide. So many of you, or most of you who we're speaking with today, live in the 43A part of the district. We are now a Baltimore City, Baltimore County district. If you want to look at, we can provide some links so that you could look at some other districts. It's not unusual to have bi-county districts. And in fact, the 44th district was a bi-county district. It was partially, I have 1/3 in the city and 2/3 in the county. And so now we are 2/3 in the city and 1/3 in the county. So next slide is 43B. That goes from the city line up to 695. And also to the right, about Providence Road, so 695 down Providence Road, Loch Raven. Some great communities are in this district. I'm just excited that we have this opportunity to represent both our city and county. We have so much in common. I do believe we'll be stronger together. And this portion of the 43rd district is represented by Kathy Forbes. I look forward to an opportunity when we all get together and can present to you. And in fact, we just did that. We all just got together and had breakfast together last Sunday. So we will be working strongly as a team. Next slide. The ballot questions, just quickly, you all knew that there were 5 different ballot questions, Maryland ballot questions. There were some city ballot questions, which I'm not going to go over, but you all had an opportunity to vote on these. They all passed. The one that got the most attention is number 4, and that had to do with the legalization of adult consumption cannabis. And if anybody has questions about that, we're happy to talk more about that. That'll come up in another section, but these are the 5 things. They all passed. Our highest court is now the Supreme Court. Now, if you are running in a Senate or a delegate district, you have to actually live in that district. Apparently, that was under law, the definition of place of abode was a little vague. So we made it much clearer, and thank you for passing that. We've been trying to pass that for a while. Also, we're just doing everything we can to make sure that the court system moves more quickly. And so that's what that 3rd question does. And 5 had to do with something that Howard County wanted to do, is to combine some of the work of its courts. Next. Oh, I guess I should have to, I'm sorry. Does anyone have any questions? Sorry about that. I was supposed to stop for questions. You can raise your hand or comments. Okay, great. All right, then we are moving along. I just wanted to give you a sampling of some of the things I've been up to. This is just some of the activities, but there's just these big buckets, and the delegate has done that, all these for the last 4 years as well. But we have our committee work. So we have committee work during the legislative session, but we also have committee work outside of the legislative session. So I was participating in the Baltimore Metropolitan Council Transit Governance and Work Group. Many of you are advocating for the Red Line. Many of you want to make sure that we have our own Baltimore Transit Authority or regional authority. I was appointed to that work group by the Senate President, and just so excited to and stand behind the recommendations that we made. We are so very fortunate that Delegate Boyce is on the committee that will be looking at these recommendations and trying to improve public transit in Maryland. And again, a number of different invited speakers, some site visits. So again, if any of you want me to come and visit, you have an issue or a project that you're working on, please feel free. As you can see, there's just lots of things focusing on all of our colleges and universities, going sometimes to our high schools. There are parades. I got to go to the Towson parade for the very first time, and that was exciting. And also we had some wanting to support some of our local businesses and communities that have a lot of concern about the overconcentration of methadone and Suboxone facilities in our district. So that's what how it was for me this session. Now I'd like to pass it on to my good colleague, Delegate Boyce.
Thank you so much, Senator. I wanted to take this opportunity to say that our Councilwoman Odette Ramos is in the room. Thank you for being here, Councilwoman. The Senator did a really good job of listing everywhere she has been. I can't remember yesterday sometimes. And so I listed it in pictures. We have opportunities, as she said, not only to be with you and community, but be a part of our respective committees. And so other than, yes, we had an election this year, a lot of our time was there. I have been at a national organization for elected Black women's conference, which was amazing. I went to the MACO, or the Maryland Association of Counties conference this summer, which was my first time attending. I hadn't been in 4 years. I had the opportunity to visit Corteva, that owns Chesapeake Farms in the Eastern Shore, and all the kind of agri-science that they're doing there as a part of I didn't mention that earlier, I'm sorry, I'm on the Environment and Transportation Committee. We are honored to have now our 25th president of Loyola, and had the great opportunity to go and see him be inaugurated. There's the Hamden Fest. We are often asked to be a part of 5Ks. I run one a year. This year I went over my max and did 2. The Marion House, and first time doing the turkey trot this year. You can see pictures with friends at the Rem Fest. See a beautiful picture of us in the middle at the Senator's event this fall with myself, Delegate-Elect Embry, and Delegate Kathy Forbes from the county. Community events. There's a picture of me in the corner. I am an adjunct professor at the University of Baltimore. Community walks, and then I had the honor to, you can see down in the middle there, I had the honor to attend. I am a first generation Caribbean American, and there was the Jamaican Association Gala this summer. And sitting there is our retired senator, Senator Washington knows well, Shirley Nathan Pulliam, as well as the mother of our new governor-elect, Wes Moore. And so those are just some of the things we do outside of session, which definitely keeps us busy. And as the senator says, as our schedule allows, as we can, we will be everywhere and anywhere that if you just let us know. And I'm going to pass it along to Delegate-Elect Embry.
Thank you. I won't add too much. Obviously, I spent a lot of time with Delegate Boyce during the campaign, going everywhere that we could think of that would have us, and it was a really wonderful, fun time, including the farmers market, the Govans Farmers Market, the Pride Festival, and also a bike ride throughout along the district on a cold and rainy day with Benita Marco. I don't think he's here, and Carol Beck. That was a lot of fun. But yeah, since the election, I have been, in many cases, with the delegation or with Delegate Boyce, meeting with all of our college and university presidents, meeting with the school system, meeting with Rec and Parks, meeting with the mayor, just to make sure that I fully understand the institutions in the district and what their legislative needs are and budgetary needs. Usually it's budgetary. Making sure I really understand that and what their goals are for sessions. So I'm spending a lot of time in meetings today. I was at Kennedy Krieger and learned, I knew a lot about what they did, but even more impressive hearing the scope of the schools they're working at across the state, actually, but mostly the Baltimore area. Gilchrist had a great tour and meeting at the hospice. So a lot of meetings like that, usually of institutions in the district, but also that are important to the state as a whole. And then the final thing I'll say is that I spent last week, 3 days last week, on a tour of the state organized by the speaker for newly elected delegates. And it was really, I was expecting it to be great. It exceeded my expectations. We visited a lot of educational institutions, including in Baltimore, Coppin State and Halliburton Academy in South Baltimore. But it was a strong focus on education. So the senator will be talking about legislative priorities for leadership in the General Assembly. And so that was certainly reinforced in this tour, the importance of not just the blueprint funding, but even more crucially this term, capital funding for school construction. So anyway, I was proud to be a Marylander and very proud to represent this district during that tour and at all times, of course. Thank you.
So I believe Delegate Boyce is going to talk about our.
Yep, I'm here. Thank you so much. Session 2023, which will be essentially the 445th legislative session this year. I want to start by saying is that the first day of session constitutionally always begins the second Wednesday of January and ends constitutionally the second Monday in April. It is a 90-day session. What that also means, so that you all know, is that we have no holidays. And so when MLK Day comes, we work. When President's Day comes, we work. Easter comes, all of the major holidays that we usually get off for, we work because it's a 90-day session and we don't mind working for you. I also should say, since 2021, we changed our rules, both House and Senate, to have what they call a pro forma session. And what this means is that usually our schedules during the week were every Monday at 8 o'clock, we were on the floor. Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, we're on the floor at 10, and Friday, we're on the floor at 11. What has happened now with pro forma is that we don't necessarily are not necessarily called to be on the House floor until there's actually House and Senate business. And so that means that the Senate President, the Speaker of the House, and presiding officers will meet to take care of administrative business, and until we actually have to be on the floor to whether it's hear first reader bills or start to field bills that have actually gone through committee, we won't be on the floor. And so that is one of the biggest changes. They are still determining what session is going to look like. But one of the beautiful things from 2021 is that session has been highly accessible to the public, and that is through our online platforms of the Maryland General Assembly, through not only through our website that goes through the YouTube channel, so you can watch Senate and then you can watch House sessions at all time. And each committee per the House and the Senate also has its own channels. So you can too watch all of the committee sessions that are going to be held. And we are not 100% sure of how session is going to run, because our Department of Legislative Services building, which is the large building between the State House and the House offices, has been demolished. And so that means all those people are spread out through the House office buildings and the Senate office buildings for office space. So those usual on-campus advocacy days may not also happen again, only because there is no space for them. So I'm sure, like in the past, there'll be creative ways for you to do that. But you can always participate, again, session virtually, but that's also through testimony. And lastly, if you ever want a virtual or a guided tour of session, you can do that by contacting Megan Ford, who is our Visitors Program Coordinator, and her responsibility and their responsibility is that they do an excellent job of giving you a tour of the State House as well as the history behind the State House. And it is one of the best tours. I recommend it for everyone. And of course, ways to contact our offices. What we failed to do, Senator, and I do apologize, is to list our social media handles, because during session, I try to put quick messages out about what's going on overall priorities, as well as my personal priorities per my bills, but what's going on in general. So you get a feel of what we're doing and that we are transparent in our reaction. So we can put some of those things in the chat box for you to have. And with that, I am passing this on to our senator.
Great. Hello, everyone. Thanks for that. As you can see, we are working really well as a team and figuring out, we have an amazing staff and supporters and members of our team that help keep things moving. Right here, it's certainly, these are not necessarily ranked in any kind of order. What happens is before every legislative session, our Department of Legislative Services looks at what we took care of in the last legislative session, what was left to be done, and also does a sort of an ecological and environmental scan of what's out there, a political scan of what are the issues that are top of mind, what are the issues that people are emailing most about, or what legislation are people doing the most searches about. So if you just would put it in the link, put the link in the chat. There is if you want to read the entire volume, it lists everything, but these are some of the things that are our tops. Of course, looking at our economic and revenue outlook, education, always. We're going to do a special focus on capital funding for school buildings, but also very much looking at the implementation of the blueprint, right? We passed the bill. We made sure that there is funding to improve our schools and to fulfill the blueprint. We're making sure that you can't in future years take money away from that. We're so looking forward to an administration that will not only put in what is required in the law, but will give additional educational dollars. Public transportation in our Baltimore region is always an issue. Healthcare, public safety, the correctional system. And I'm reading it out because some people are listening and they're not able to see the screen. So making sure that they can hear what's happening. Our environment and natural resources is key. Our state and federal climate change legislation and initiatives. Again, looking forward to having federal and state administrations that are aligned on the goals to mitigate climate change, to make sure that our streams are clean and that our air is clean. So we will have a partner in the federal government as well as in the governor's office. And so really looking forward to that. Water supply and wastewater systems, as you recall, over the summer and over the fall, these are infrastructure issues, that there are cracks in some of the pipes, not just in Baltimore City, but in the state as a whole. Our systems are old or aging. And so we need to make sure that we look at and also the issue of affordability. And then finally, as an issue is the cannabis industry regulation. And we didn't put it on the slide, but certainly, ensuring that everyone has the ability to have access to the full range of reproductive services. And again, that's an issue. The delegates wanted to make sure that I added, even though it didn't make the point. But of course, I think it's just that of course we're going to do that. But we look forward to fighting off any attempts to limit it. And also, what are we doing with the fact that Maryland is going to become a haven for people looking for access, and how do we make sure that we provide those services? And so now the next phase, so these are our policy and sort of operational issues and what we do every year, but also actually the only thing that we have to do constitutionally is to pass a budget. And so I believe Delegate Embry is going to
Delegate Boyce.
Delegate Boyce is going to do it. Is going to talk about the budget authority, and then
no problem.
Things. And
to the senator's point, our only real constitutional responsibility is to ensure a balanced budget, which the governor submits, and then we, like in most legislatures, we can let me put it like this. Maryland is the only state where the governor can actually directly add items or amounts to the budget. And then the Maryland General Assembly, per section 52 of the Maryland Constitution, states that we cannot increase the budget item amounts, we cannot add new appropriations, or move funding from one program to another. So starting this fiscal year 24, we are now in the MGA, we can actually increase, reduce, or add to the budget, and then we will have still our abilities to restrict funding. But note that, of course, a balanced budget must still pass. It must be equal to or lesser than the budget proposed by the governor. And so we cannot necessarily increase the budget, but we can move around within the budget. And the new of course, the new constitutional amendment allows the governor to be able to veto line items that the Maryland General Assembly has added to the budget. And so it's going to be a great new year, but I wish we had this 4 years ago, because now when a priority doesn't suit, the General Assembly doesn't believe works for the people, we can make those additions or changes, again, so long as it maintains within the kind of structural confines of what the actual budget numbers are. So we are excited about that opportunity as more legislatures across the country, even our own, I believe, local legislature can for council can actually have this authority, and what it's going to do for us is going to be pretty amazing. So with that, I will pass it on. Sorry, that's me too.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
So bond bills, which you guys know as bond bills, but the technical term is legislative bond initiatives, are authorized funding initiatives that can be brought through the General Assembly. And so they are very easy to maintain. First and foremost, a legislative bond initiative eligibility is it must be a project, right, that is one, ready to go, right, ready to go. And it must have a real estate or an acquisition effect. It must have a planning and design feature. It must have construction and renovation. It must have a public use. It must be your community center, your health facilities, your museums, your recreational facilities, or facilities that are for specific groups, or but not, for instance, a religious group. It cannot be used for operating expense and certain non-capital equipping or furnishings. And it has to have a useful life of 15 years. This has got to be a project that is definitely not only ready to go, it must definitely have a public use, but it has to at least have a public use for 15 years. Next slide, please. And so it is those interested in LBI can fill out a form and submit it to us. What's interesting about this process is that it becomes a bill, and that bill is then put through and then funded both on the House and Senate side. So it is good, and the senator knows this, is that we cross-file these bills so that a project can get as much funding as possible and what's available both on the House and Senate side. If we only file on the Senate side, it'll be only eligible for or can receive Senate side money. If it only goes on the House side, it can only get House side money. So we tend to find out how many priorities we have out there and then cross file so that we can get the maximum amounts for our communities. The grantee, of course, must match the name that is recorded on the SSTAT records. And so if it's you that owns the property or the entity applying for must match the entity on SSTAT records in order to apply. The Senate deadline to file is the 27th day of session, and in the House is the 31st. Every once in a while, something late comes in, we somewhat can get it through, but as soon as you know, you can submit those forms in. And we can start that process as early as possible, because then you will need to do a second portion of this process. Next slide, please. And so second part, so of course, once we have submitted and we get back our green forms and submit them and sign them off, they go into a tracking database. More documentation is requested from the from us as it relates to the project. We'll get an email stating from DLS that, there's a link for your specific project. So fact sheets can be put in, facts about the project as it relates to its eligibility. Once we receive those during sessions, that deadline is March 7th. There is what we didn't put on here is what we call a legislative bond day. Well, it's usually called Bond Bill Day, but again, we don't call them bond bills anymore. But it's a Saturday in about mid-March where all the bond initiatives across the state are reviewed by the appropriations committees. And in the past, it used to be an in-person event. It no longer is. It is just done online now through a process to make sure there are, the project is checked for its documents and is checked for funding, or excuse me, it's checked for its funding amounts and so on. And then it goes through that portal, and then that committee, subcommittee on appropriations, will make those determinations about funding. You will either be funded or not, or you will be funded not necessarily at the maximum amount that you wanted or not. But usually if you are not funded, it may be that your project did not meet the requirements and or you did not get in enough of your paperwork in time to be considered. And then once your LBI is in and you can track it, once it's in the system in the proceeding, the project can be tracked on the MGA website. And once we actually pass the legislation, the process goes through the Department of General Services to then release those funds to the project in about summer. I would say usually after July 1st, those funds start being relinquished to the projects.
Wow, as you see, thank you so much, Delegate. We spent a lot of time on that section because we get a lot of requests and we know that there are needs, and we wanted to start being a very much of a transparent. So every year, we would report out what we've funded, but this year we wanted to again start that in the very beginning, letting you know exactly what's going to be contemplated and making sure that everybody understands the criteria and that the criteria that we have to operate under. So we don't have full discretion. We are legislators, and we must abide. everyone has to vote on it. So again, we've been very fortunate. We are very assertive about reaching out to communities and fighting hard to get what's needed in our district. This is probably a good time to take some questions because we're like right on target. We told you, so in any of the areas around the budget, the LBI process, what do you think of the redistricting, anything that has come before, please just put your question in the box, in the chat if you're shy, or raise your hand. Delegate Boyce and I are both professors, so we have we know how to scan a room to look for raised hands, and if we miss a raised hand, our partners in our office will let us know. Looking for a raised hand. There's one question.
I see no raised hands. Is there
Yeah.
a question in the chat?
There's some questions.
Oh, there's
in the chat.
I see
Yep.
Jody.
Is there an info page on the LBI? Did I miss explaining the requirements? We will share the PowerPoint. Also, it's a good idea. We will probably, I know I have it on my website. I'm sure Delegate Boyce will also post those requirements on the website. Also, in the meantime, maybe one of our staff can get a hold of a link that people could look at.
Yeah, this is all on the Maryland General Assembly's webpage, and we can put the link in the chat.
Yep. So if you all see a question, feel free to jump in. We'll give this a few minutes. I see a question about the women's pre-release. Yes, so we've been working on this all 4 years, and it's been passed. But the money has been sitting in the budget, but this administration has not spent it. So again, we are looking forward to, and so Carol, that's your question. And again, this is legislation that I've been working on in coalition with formerly incarcerated women and advocates. I'm ensuring that there's a women's pre-release. We have men's pre-release centers, but none for women that are built. There used to be one in Baltimore, and it was closed 12 years ago. So yes, I'm hoping that we have the funding, but now we're looking forward to it being spent. If somebody else wants to take a question. I see Janethia, you have your hand up. Did you have a question?
Someone needs to take her off mute, please.
Yeah, take her off mute. Everybody's on mute.
I just want to understand a little bit better about the bond initiatives. So you get, let's say you get within this district, you get 5 proposals. Do you all assess those before they are then submitted, or do you automatically push forward all initiatives that are proposed?
Well, so what happens, that's a great question. And so the process will weed out any, project that kind of makes the requirements or not. And so it's like anything else. If all of them have a project and they apply and they meet the requirements, then they go to the next phase and the next phase. So we don't necessarily have to do the vetting other than to make sure, for instance, people come all the time saying, well, I want to do this thing, it's at a church. Like, so one year, for instance, Lovely Lane, which is a church, wanted a bond initiative, but because they're a church, they weren't eligible for a bond initiative, but because they were kind of transforming what they're doing and a part of their facility would be of public use, I think somehow we were able to work that in, but as a church itself, absolutely not, right? Because it's not a full public use. And so the process ends up weeding out any ineligibilities. So.
And then also in terms of my process, even when I was a delegate, I would visit. We visit when people request. So I know Delegate Boyce has done at least one or two. And I also know that Delegate-Elect Embry has gone to a few. I've gone to many. So we will go. And sometimes you'll talk with someone and they think they want a bond, and you find out, well, this is actually operating. So maybe you might want to try to get into the budget, or maybe you're an institution that doesn't quite qualify, then maybe there's another, or maybe you could qualify under some other area. So if you have an
Right.
idea, if you have something, the thing is that we work very hard to fund all the needs of our district.
Absolutely.
So if it doesn't fit in the bond, we look elsewhere.
Okay, could I shoehorn in something else? You gave a list of priorities that are all make absolute sense. But on one of the earlier screens, in terms of committees or things that people were from this district were involved with, one was as I recall, was a committee on ending homelessness.
Yeah, I'm the chair. Yes.
Priorities, I didn't see anything about homelessness, which seems to me like kind of important.
Yeah. Again, I told you my process that certainly in a moment, we will, maybe this is a good time to transition to this after we have another question, but we have our legislative priorities, and they may or may not match what the whole state as a whole is looking at. But certainly housing, to be frank, has not been the type of focus on it that should. And I believe that it will change, and that under this administration, we'll see more. But no, we don't put enough money, I say we, but just the state, into rapid rehousing. And legislature, we don't have the ability to put more money into that. So going forward, we will be able to. But you're right. It's personally an interest of ours, but it doesn't pop up on the statewide priority.
Thank you.
Keith Holt is next. And I think after him, we're going to move on so we can have questions at the end.
Yep.
Keith, somebody unmute Keith.
Hello. Hello,
Yeah.
can you hear me?
So,
Yes, we can hear
Yeah.
you.
Okay. Well, first I do want to start off. Thank you so much for having this engaging conversation. Of course, we get on Zoom a lot, and we have conversations that people talk at us. So I appreciate the fact that, that the community can get
We can't hear you, Keith. So I don't know if you can take your camera off and maybe, hold your question until till a little after 7, because that's when we'll get started. So we're going to move on to our legislative initiatives. So Delegate Boyce.
Thank you. Hold on one second. I'm gonna move this out of hold on. My computer is a little janky because it is my old computer, so I'm having a little trouble. Give me one second. Here we go. And so, of course, this thing is blocking my view. I can look at it from here. Here we go. And so I very quickly and hopefully thoroughly, I can talk about my bills, from reintroduce new bills and potential bills that I'm still working through that may or may not be filed. And so for reintroduced bills, for the last 3 years, I've introduced a paint stewardship bill. And this bill essentially creates a paint recycling program statewide to have a location through partnerships with hardware stores to collect used paint, for which 85% of that paint can be either reused or recycled for tint, and then the other 15% can appropriately be discarded. We are praying for this year to be the year that it passes, because it is an excellent example of an extended producer's responsibility legislation. Rescue inhaler, 2 years in a row, it passed the House last year, would authorize the state to allow schools to create policies for rescue inhalers in school. The prevalence of asthma is in more and more and more, and it is not necessarily discovered until there's an asthma incident. And in most cases, not only just for children, but for adults, the first sign of asthma tends to be an asthma attack, which is usually death. And so we want to prevent that from occurring. And so looking to reintroduce that bill again. Election law, central committees, this bill for the last 3 years, I have filed it to essentially keep elected officials and those who are elected to be party volunteers separate. And so it essentially prohibits an elected official, someone like myself or someone like on the council, from also running for and being a part of the central committee. And finally, another bill introduced is a bill that I've introduced for the last 2 years that would allow Baltimore, the state will give Baltimore City the authority to classify, allow it to create property taxes for different classes of property. And so in the city, we have 10 classes of property, and this bill would allow the city to kind of look at its property taxing structure and then decide. It is a tool, it is not enabling, it is enabling, not a mandate. It would allow it to then be able to set certain property tax rates per each class of property. We are looking to again do that again to diversify our tax base, but most importantly for me, one, potentially lower property taxes for the resident, but two, hold those who are holding on to property accountable by raising the tax for them. New bills, high school basketball schedule. This bill passed actually in 2020, but due to COVID did not make it to the Senate. This bill essentially increases the number of basketball games that a team can play. So right now their schedule allows them for 20. This bill allows them to have 22 games so that they can actually participate in tournament games. When you play a tournament game, the tournament game usually counts against your total high school or local record. And so allowing them to play would give them an ability to be more competitive within not only the local area, but within the region. Bring your own bag initiative. This is essentially a initiative creates the protocol and incentives for retailers to provide usable bags to reduce, of course, the use of plastic bags. We know this as the plastic ban bill, bag ban bill, but we don't want to call it that. We want to incentivize letting people know that they can bring their own bag. They don't have to bring plastic. But this bill will only be introduced if about 4 local jurisdictions and actually pass their local bag bills. If they pass their local bag bills, given the turnover in their kind of local councils, this bill will be introduced either mid or late January. The next bill is a Class A7 liquor license. And so what this does, it just corrects a mistake. A drafter made a mistake in 2020 on a bill that now, because of it, does not allow any A7 liquor licenses in the 43rd district. So it's pretty simple. Next slide, please. And then bills in progress. These are bills that are still being talked through. Language is still being worked on, but one is the climate equity bill. This bill was introduced last year by myself and some advocates. It was too broad. And so this year we worked on paring it down. I think we now have it ready to be filed, but essentially it will create a kind of a testing and a review process for permits across agencies that have potential climate and environmental justice impacts. And then a searching to ensure that where those permits are, that there isn't an additional due harm to communities who are usually disproportionately affected by environmental impacts. Environmental impacts of death. I've been interested in this for a long time, given the opening of Serenity, I believe in Owings Mills. It's a natural burial site, but I'm looking at introducing a bill that would have MDE and others look at the environmental impact of death and death as it relates to the disposition of one's body, whether it's burial, whether it's cremation, whether it is liquefaction, whether it is natural barriers and so many other options that folks have for one's final resting place. The next bill is climate resilience. The bill working with Blue Water Baltimore would require the state to kind of create and implement an impervious surface restoration plan and requirement. And so of the impervious land discovered, I guess, within each jurisdiction, that jurisdiction would be required, for instance, to bring back 2% of that impervious surface to pervious surface for the next X amount of years. And so it requires a massive study to determine what that impervious surface is and how much of it can be converted back to a green space to help mitigate stormwater runoff. And then the last one is potential legislation about dirt bikes and seeing if we can marry some of the legislation that the city has done here to the state level so that as a state, we can better combat dirt bikes. And it's not necessarily in this past session, we had someone who introduced a bill to just kind of increase a fine of $1,000, I think it was $1,000 fine and like 2 years in jail. But the issue was that it doesn't do anything because you still have to catch the individual, and we don't have chase laws, not only in the city, but across the state. We don't have chase laws. Our chase laws don't allow us to chase bikes. And so we're looking at registration, we're looking at titling, we're looking at, of course, storage, we're looking at holding those accountable who either sell them secondhand to areas and to individuals who otherwise should not have them. We're looking at sellers. And so looking at all parties involved to get a better handle on dirt bikes and ensuring that those who do ride them and do ride them lawfully and in the right places can enjoy them, and those who do not will not. And I am done. Pass it on to Delegate-Elect Embry.
Thank you. Oh, good. I'm off mute. So I want to start with a couple of caveats. The biggest caveat is I don't yet have a committee or subcommittee assignment. So that will significantly determine the subject area that I will be responsible for knowing and being involved in every bill that is introduced dealing with that subject matter. So that's an important caveat. And the second caveat is I am currently just in the process of meeting with every important group, both in the district and across the state. So it is a shifting priority list. And if any of you today have a terrific idea for legislation, I will add it to my list. But just generally, having spent time talking with the school system, the school construction funding, and the senator is right, absolutely. Of course, the accountability piece of Blueprint, very important. But additionally, there's a real deficit in what the city will be receiving for construction funding and what they need. And that's largely due to larger causes like supply chain issues, reduced bond revenue, things that are not anyone's fault. But I think we as a delegation need to be smart about supporting the city and making up that deficit. There's also, I won't go into it, but the school system spent a lot of time just walking, me through primarily because I'm new, but just all the ways that the city is disadvantaged in the construction funding formulas, and there's many and they're complex. And one is that we as a city, because we're poorer than other jurisdictions, we just contribute far less local money, and that has ripple effects on what the sort of the scale and the quality of the schools can be. And so cuts are made because we're not locally funding in the way that other jurisdictions are. So it's a complicated issue, but I just look forward to being an advocate for the school system in that area. Also, we all know the tremendous effects of COVID, both the outright learning deficit and then the related issues of mental health. So supporting teachers, school students on efforts to effectively address that. Obviously, tutoring is one of the most validated methods, and the school system fully endorses that. So that's one, but there's many needs in that area. Healthcare, continuing to expand access, making sure that it's really easy for people who are eligible to access healthcare, Medicaid, Medicare, you name it. Just figuring out every way possible to increase the ease of access. And then the prescription drug affordability panel commission, I'm sorry, I always get that wrong, but they'll be making recommendations, are making recommendations this session for how Maryland can lower prescription drug costs. Obviously, the federal government has taken action, which is great, but I still think and hope that Maryland can do more because that is such a critical cost for so many of our families. Public transportation options, I know that's a priority. Our future governor has said, has committed to the red line and is also committed to a strategy along the York Road corridor that will improve transportation options for the region. I will be an advocate for that. I also think, I don't think I'm alone in this, that we need to have some form of regional authority so that the city has a say, has an actual say in these decisions, and that it's not solely a state function beyond, of course, the General Assembly's say, but an authority that includes the state and the neighboring counties in the city. And public safety, I've talked a lot about prison reentry. I am so excited. I think this is a governor who really cares about this issue, doing at scale, a data-proven reentry program that supports everyone coming out of prison and makes sure to meet their needs, whether it's housing, workplace support, mental health needs. It is something that pays for itself, and that's been shown even in Maryland as well as across the country. And so I'm excited to work with an administration that I know is passionate about this. Parole and probation has been dramatically underfunded under the Hogan administration, and that's had effects both in public safety concerns about people who are high risk, who have not been properly supervised, but also people who probably shouldn't have been subject to supervision, who are then, once you're under supervision, you're then liable to having arrests for technical violations that are often completely unnecessary. So having a smart and stronger probation system that is effectively responding to the needs of people who are sentenced to that supervision. And the senator talked about reproductive rights. I know that there'll be a renewed effort by many leaders in the General Assembly to establish a state constitutional protection. There will also be an effort, which I'm excited to be part of, to protect providers and people in the state of Maryland who are helping people in states where abortion is banned or severely limited. We want to make sure that they can't be criminally prosecuted and extradited from Maryland. We want to make sure they can't, if they're sued, that Maryland courts will not uphold those judgments. So we need to protect people here who are trying to do the right thing for people in other states. Climate resiliency, we have obviously infrastructure needs within the city, and many of you on this call know about the project in Hill and Road and 33rd and extended even beyond that. But making sure that the 43rd district especially, but also the city, is appropriately receiving funds to support climate resiliency needs. And then, as the senator and the delegate have already been involved with setting really ambitious carbon fossil fuel goals for the state of Maryland, just helping make sure we pass the legislation needed to reach those goals. So with, again, the initial caveats of not knowing my committee and that this is expanding as I meet with so many wonderful people, these are my priorities for the session. Thank you.
Wonderful, wonderful. And I want to make sure that that we give shout outs to folks who are here. That we were to do that under our roll call, but this is a good time. I'm going to welcome Ashley Esposito, our Delegate-Elect for Baltimore City. I see we have representatives from the York Road Initiative, York Road Partnership. We have Kyra McDonald, but also I think I want to point out that we have Gia Greer, who's the executive director of the Center for Service Justice Study for Community Service and Justice, and the York Road Initiative comes under her heading. Thank you so much for being here. Please feel free to post anything that you'd like us to know about. We have Carol Rice, we have representatives from Surge here, the president of the League of Women Voters, Ms. Green, Tuscany Canterbury, Ms. Aiken. You saw the 43rd District Central Committee is here. Associate Pastor Isaac Moasi, the University of Baltimore Church, and the BPW chaplain. Great to see you. We've got Zero Waste policy organizers. We've got Mr. Melvin Jadalong, who is the co-chair of the Greater Greenmount Community Association. It was good to see you the other night. We do part of 43A, Barclay, East Baltimore, Midway. And also we've got many people, the Maryland Legislative Coalition, again, Food and Water Watch. John Seacock of Civic Works was with us. Bridget Neal had to leave, but she says hello. Diana Emerson, Waverly Main Street and Able Improvement, and also a Central Committee member. And you mentioned Odette Ramos. Angie Winder, president of NECO, which is an umbrella of a number of different organizations and doing really great work. Getting folks engaged and reinvigorating that community. Laura Peltier with Getco Cares, also a huge advocate and supportive of ensuring that utilities are fairly priced. Just go on and on. So many of you able are there. I just wanted to make sure you all got a shout out. And we have the president of our our former president of the Baltimore City Central Committee and 43rd District resident Corinthia Barba is there as well. So, and Sir James Weaver. What a great name. I'm not going to go into the detail because I want to make sure that we have time, but I did want to highlight what are not only some of the general areas that I've worked on and that I'll continue to work on, my commitment to fairness, diversity, and social justice. So any piece of legislation or budget initiative that fits under that category, I'm engaged with. I'm currently a member of the Education, Health, and the Environment Committee, but as was said, we don't know where we're assigned this year. Also, I've committed myself and remain vigorous in my advocacy to remove any barrier to education, whether it's elementary education, whether it's higher education, whether it's ensuring that a student's status, their of ability, their orientation, where they live, that there are no barriers. Particularly, I've done a lot of work on supporting youth who are unaccompanied and homeless in that matter. Also wanted to support and lift up our small businesses, focusing on a number of initiatives along the York Road to get funding there to support the building out of businesses and to make sure that predatory businesses don't exist and are hurting others. Also want to support the entrepreneurs that are our district. So look forward to seeing some legislation there, community development and public safety, affordable water and utilities. As you know, I fought to ensure that no one would lose their home for unpaid water bills. But over the last 3 years, I've been focused very much on energy. I'm sure you all are very aware of the third-party energy providers that offer these introductory variable rates, and then their rates can go up excessively to the point where people are paying more for their energy than if they had just stuck with their original provider. So we're going to be doing work with them in coalition with AARP and a number of senior organizations. Also, I am too looking at some funding models about how our senior centers are funded, looking to change that. And also focusing on consumer protection, really stopping some unfair, deceptive, and fraudulent work in business practices. I have there's a couple of bills that I have already submitted. One is to increase the funding for a hunger-free campus grant program. One of the barriers to a higher education is the fact that our students are hungrier, and so not just in our elementary schools, we take care of that under our federal state programs, but we don't have a similar type of program for our colleges and universities. And this is just the beginning of it. I was able to pass legislation that got some funding, about $125,000 Looking to bump that up to $1 million this year. Looking at making sure that we have some employee-owned businesses in the 43rd district, and I'm putting forth legislation about workers' cooperative statutes that will make it easier for employees to own, of course, to own the businesses in which they work in, but to affiliate. Right now in Maryland, they have to affiliate in Virginia and some other states because we really don't have an infrastructure for that. So we're looking to do that. So again, a number of areas focusing on making sure that water bills are affordable, continuing to do that work, maybe increasing our automatic voter registration, making sure that works as well. And one program that there's a number that I'm proud of, but been working with the dentists and we'll be putting forward expansion of dental care for young children, very young children. So and seeing how we can both support it, but also maybe in some contexts require it as a part of coming into school. Right now, you have to make sure they have their shots. The dentists I talk to say that, from pre-K to kindergarten, oral hygiene is very, very important at that stage. And so making sure that we're making it as easy as possible for parents. So with that, here's let's hear from you. That's some of our ideas. Some legislation has been put in, but the delegates and I are here to listen. This won't be the only time that we talk, but we just wanted to make sure we had an opportunity. So.
Maria has
Any
her hand up,
questions?
Senator.
Yes, sorry, just jump in.
Maria?
Thank you. So I'm so glad that you're doing this. I think this is fantastic. And I'm glad to see that a lot of your priorities are in areas that we are really concerned with, which would be environmental justice, public health, asthma. All of these things are really important. This kind of fits in there. We support the renewable portfolio standard. We're trying to pull the dirty energy, like incineration, things we're dealing with down here on the Eastern Shore, which is poultry waste into energy, things that are what we would consider to be not clean energy. And I'm wondering where everyone stands on supporting the RPS bill, which is to reclaim renewable energy. Thank you.
Well, I can say every year I support, and I believe the delegate does, we support the amendment that tries to remove incineration as a tier 1 for tax purposes. And so we're united in that. We are all supportive of that. So Keith, you have a better connection. Maybe Keith.
Hello, can you hear me better?
There you go. Now we can hear you.
Okay. Wow, technology is beautiful. First, let me say thank you so much for having this conversation. I think that is really important. Lots of times there's so many Zoom conversations that the community get taught that. So it's great to have an engaging conversation that we can actually talk to you all three. So thank you so much for having this conversation. My question is, of course, we all have seen like an increase of crime that has been going on in our district lately. So I'm just wondering, will it be any legislation possibly that could be on the books to help curb crime in our area by any chance? And also just a side note to Delegate Boyce, I really, really did appreciate the asthma component, me being an asthmatic, and also recently we just buried a community member that didn't have insurance that died for asthma. So I definitely commend you on that. Thank you so much. But my question was about crime in the crime in the district. Is there any legislation on the books for that?
I'm happy to, if that's all right, to go first.
Yes. Sure thing, yeah.
So having worked in this area, the state has a limited role in crime fighting. The mayor does have a few legislative priorities that I think will help. They're not dramatic. I mean, I think they're important and useful, just tightening up oversight, but it's tough for the state to get involved in actual operational work of the police department. But there's, I think, a lot of work to be done in the things the state does control, which are prisons, parole and probation, the juvenile justice system, and then all of the criminal justice grants. So I think that for me, that's what I've been looking at. Where does the state have power? Where is the state money being spent? How is it being spent? And how could it be spent in a way that's strengthens public safety in Baltimore, reduces crime, and also is more equitable, and with the, with the goal of actually reducing the number of people who are in that system as a whole. And then the other piece of that is that this delegation has long supported public health approaches, supporting the health department and nonprofits that are trying to attack violence. Safe Streets, ROCA too, but there are many trying to support all of those programs that have been shown to be effective. So I think those are the two areas, where the state intersects with criminal justice, and then supporting innovative programs that are largely public health, but not just public health, but are sort of outside of criminal justice, but do in fact have an impact on crime. We are as frustrated, as everyone is, with all of the crime that's going on around the district, and in close communication with the police department, and trying at least to help constituents get answers, make sure that there's nothing in the way of response to specific crimes or patterns of crimes. But I think for the state role, I think those are the areas that are the most effective.
And then and to that, our role is like you. We attend the protests, we attend the hearings, we write to our representatives, we meet with the police department, we fund. I do believe that we need to do more in the prevention of crime. And so that's about infrastructure and lighting and transportation and all those things. But yes, we are very, very frustrated.
And I just want to finally just add to that is that, the city was required to do police redistricting. And one of the things that it's going to help with, we have to see how it works, is that there will be, even though there's a less amount of officers, the redistricting will help put officers and resources in place where they're needed the most. And so I'm anxious to see how that actually is going to work out. And does the redistricting actually help? And then if it does help, then what more from there are we going to need as it relates to crime prevention? I think there's some comments, Senator, there's some questions in the chat.
I see it. It's you're talking about the state pension and that it does not allow members to make changes to death benefit contribution amounts. Alice, could you ask that to us a little bit so maybe we can check it out? Are you still on is Alice? Okay. All right, then, well, we'll research it, and maybe that's another bill. Delegate Boyce and I had a bill last year, 2 years ago, dealing with death and enabling people to grieve, have a grieving benefit. So we will look into that. The annual inspection program would be considered to ensure vehicles are operating in a safe manner. Okay, so Melvin, I put that bill in 2 years ago. Maryland has one of the, so some states have 21 different items you have to check. Maryland has just about 10. I put in a bill to say, oh, the brakes have to be fixed, etc. And I could not get that bill out of committee. Additionally, I got a lot of pushback, which I, hadn't thought about, but I have to figure it out. The argument was that is disproportionately impacting poor people, because poor people have cars that are going to be in greater disrepair, and so they're not going to be able to repair them. And so, but then I also feel like, well, then that means that people in poor neighborhoods are going to be disproportionately impacted by unsafe cars. So we really have to figure that out, but I have not put it in my reintroduce, but it is in my, we've got to figure this out because our current vehicle inspection is very below par. Does anyone see any other questions they want to take on? I see Janithia waving her hand. You need to take your mic on, please.
I wanted to go back to the crime prevention issue. And I'm wondering, the one area that and please correct me if I remember this wrong. At the moment, although it has been in dispute, the Baltimore City Police Department remains under state control. Is that correct? And if that is so, then if that is not a good idea in terms of dealing with crime in the city, what is to be done?
So the voters voted to restore local control over policing to Baltimore City. And so now Baltimore City can define how it manages its policing.
Oh, okay.
It has, yes, it will be much better.
Okay, good.
I just saw Lori Feinberg's point about the cost of prison calls. That's a great issue. I appreciate you raising it.
Yeah, and so that, it's funny, that has been something, they subcontract that out, so it's privatized. There are a number of things regarding corrections, contracting out the healthcare, contracting out education, contracting out so much. So we've not been able to get a good look into any state agency, frankly, for the last 8 years. And so we are really looking forward to being able to have much more transparency. And this sort of subcontracting out is hopefully will come to an end. I also liked, I was looking, thank you for sharing your piece on the voting centers. That is something that we absolutely, I believe we should consider as well. Is any other questions? Does anyone have anything they want to share? Oh, there we go. Anne's back. Thank you.
Hi, thank you all for holding this session. That's been really helpful. This is really for Senator Washington. Is the legislation that you're that I think you've been doing for several years on protecting and ensuring that there is funding for building schools and renovating schools, does that include measures that would address both the costs involved, short and long term, and emissions reductions by requiring renewable, like solar panels or any other kinds of emission reductions and energy savings?
So the Climate Solutions Now Act, and again, Delegate Boyce we served on the two committees that wrestled with that legislation in the last 2 years. I will say we wanted much stronger investment in that, but it is part of it. And so ensuring that any new schools that are built are able to benefit from that and to require that. Delegate Boyce.
Yeah, I was going to say one of the major issues is that every school isn't created equal, and it's not on, for instance, an equal amount of land mass. So the senator and I, per her committee, had an opportunity to tour one of 3 net zero schools in the state when we were at, I believe, Wild Lake. And no, was that the name of it?
No, there was one in actually in South Baltimore.
Yeah, but the one that we visited in Howard County, they had solar panels, for instance,
they
and
did,
the solar panels were not only on the roof, but they were on additional field across the street, and then they had enough land to be able to have, for instance, geothermal. Then we talking about a city school, for instance, we don't have, in some cases, with the exception of the one school, Halliburton, we don't have the ability, for instance, to do a geothermal. So there are things looking at what we can do, but like every school, depending on the age of the school, whether it's going to be a total reconstruction or a rehab, depending on where it is and what it can be done, there will be a difference in what can and cannot be done as far as those measures. So it's something that we're hoping that they're looking at. I know the senator who was the head of EHE wanted every school to be like a net zero school, but it's almost impossible and yet possible. And it's possible in that each school would have a different system, but it's impossible to have it the same way as a traditional, whether it's the solar panels or the geothermal. So I know that there are thoughts. The other issue that, of course, Delegate-Elect Embry brought up is that, even with school construction now, the cost is more. It costs more to do the work. And so, if you've got a bid from a couple of years ago to do a school now, that bid is now up, if not by half, because the cost of not only materials have gone up, but the cost of labor has gone up. And so, it's a real struggle right now, but it's one of the plans. It just is not
We're going to keep at it.
done.
We're going to keep at it again.
We're going to keep at it.
Thank you.
Our
Yeah.
committee wanted, all zero. We do recognize that one size does not fit all, but we do believe that if you do net zero, that in the long run, you save money. And so
Absolutely.
we have to, we just have to convince more people. So not only will it save money, it'll save the environment, save our air. And so we'll just keep on keeping on that one. My
Councilwoman.
our councilwoman, Odette Ramos has a question or a comment.
Yeah. Hi, everybody. Good evening. I don't want to keep you too long. I just want to say I'm so honored to be represented by 3 amazing women. Come on now. I think it's awesome. I have just wanted Delegate Boyce to talk a little bit more about the tax differentials bill, because one of the things that I'm really hopeful for when this passes, I'm going to do positive when this passes, is that then in Baltimore City, we can do a vacancy tax. And that's something that a lot of people have talked about, whether we do a vacancy tax. And the only way that it works is because we have this new in-rem system where we can foreclose on properties, but we need actually the liens to exceed the value. And so by having a tax that we can put on a house, they're not going to pay it, but the liens will stack up. And so then we can foreclose. So I think this is a really amazing opportunity, not just because of that, but some of the other positive things we can do with differential tax rate. So Delegate, do you want to have anything else to say about that? I just wanted to fill in those details because I think it's like super important. And taxes are like, people get a headache from it. So I want to make sure.
I know. So one of the things I think we need to do is build a coalition, more of our constituents to support it. It is supported by the mayor and the city council, and it has been for the last 2 years. There is a political debate about what precedent it sets, and it doesn't matter. Our job is that we set precedents, how we set precedents, but we are setting a precedent for Baltimore City, saying that we need another tool in the toolbox in order to, one, get people moving from these vacant properties, especially the ones that are being sat on, but most importantly, how do we lower the tax rate for the people who live here, which is most important to me than anything else. It's not enough to continue to build out so that more people will come here if you can't take care of the people who are already here. And so we are getting support again. It's certainly in the mayor's initiative. He is supporting it again. And we are looking at ways and talking to the committee about letting this go through, given the fact that the city has the highest property tax rate in the state, as well as the highest poverty rate in the state. And if we have more tools to do so, and just to give you an example, this is something that DC does do. They have 5 classes of property, and depending on the property, whether it's residential, which is, it's like 88 cents to the dollar, or if it's 3 separate ranges within the kind of hospitality commercial. There's 3 different rates, and then depending on the value of the property, so 5 million and less is one, 5 million to 10 million is a certain price, and then over 10 million there's a certain cost, and then there is a $5, I believe, on vacant per $100 assessed, and then I think it's $10 for blighted. And so, you know, the point is not to for some of this property, right? We don't know who owns it, or it's an issue of, you know, somebody died and there is no next of kin, or the next of kin doesn't want it, so it's sitting kind of in limbo. But we have a good number of property where people are just as happy as paying a very low rate in taxes every year for a property to be essentially boarded up in a blight in our communities. And if we can use this tool to get these folks moving, because the councilwoman can attest, there are people who want to do work in Baltimore, and there is enough housing stock as it is to at least rehab and have more housing here, especially as we talk about affordable housing. And so it is not it's not going to solve all of our problems, but it is going to be a very strong tool in our toolbox to use. So I'm hoping that we can gain the support we need.
Yep, and so we're just going to go over a little because there's some great questions, and if you want to stay, people feel free. I want to say, I have Mona, you're saying revamp the lemon law. Mona, actually, as a matter of fact, under my consumer protection, I will be putting in a bill that looks at flood cars. I don't know if you're aware of this, but actually my friend Franz Schneiderman is an advocate on good, for the good side of the car auto industry that wants more regulation. But there's no requirement to disclose that a car had been in a flood. So that is something that that I will be putting legislation to either bar those from the market, or to make sure that if you're buying something, if your used car dealer is buying a bunch of cars at auction, they are made aware that some of these cars were in a flood and dried out, and then not, then they won't. They probably won't buy it because they don't want to sell that to you unknowingly. So thanks for that. In terms of advocating for housing solutions, you have all of our contact information. We'll put it in the chat again. Please just reach out to us, and very much interested. That's Lila. And so any other folks, if we don't see you, want to make sure that everyone is heard tonight. Delegates, are you seeing anyone?
I think so. My
There we
email.
go. We got Paula. Okay, we got Paula.
Paula provides.
Yes.
My cousin.
Hi, Delegate and Senator. I wanted to ask, and I put in a question as to whether there was going to be anything budgeted for the Northwood Library renovation.
Yes, Paula, I'm very excited. So yes, we will be working on so the answer is yes. I've gotten commitments from the mayor, the governor, and the CEO of the library system that will get significant investments in Waverly. Because as part of our legislative bond initiative, and also looking at building out Waverly Library is one of the most used libraries in the system, so it needs more space. And then also the Northwood Library itself, given its community, that also deserves a brand new building. So, and as a matter of fact, I have a meeting being scheduled with the head of the Library of Congress. As you all know, she used to be the former head of our own libraries. Turns out they have capital grants So I'm really excited to talk with them and see how we can, build out there. So thanks. I forgot to mention that as one of my meetings and one of my projects, but we'll be working as a district, of course, but I've had some individual specific meetings on that.
Oh, good. I also just wanted to know if there are any alternative spaces that would be looked at during any renovation or new building process.
Right. Well, you recommended the school across the street, right? You said
Yes.
you thought, yeah. And so that's what I told Heidi Daniels, that if, when they are doing that the community, we talked about that in, I guess, the meeting a couple months ago,
Okay.
that would be what you would prefer. Is that still?
Well, because it's across the street from the library, people would, that's a closer space for them to go to.
Right.
And I do know that the pastor right now of the church is looking at what kind of use can be had for the since it was a school before,
Okay.
what kind of use could be used for that building.
Would you help make that connection? Because my office has tried to connect with Pastor Gray. And so we
Pastor Gray is not there any longer, but please have them call me.
Call you and make the connection. Thank you so much.
Yes.
I was wondering what was happening there. So we'll make that connection.
Okay, thank you.
The other thing that you all should look at, Delegate Boyce and I have been really focusing on the city CIP process. That's our capital improvement plan, and the state every year. We approve about 80 million in bonds, and we are going to be hyper focused on the allocation of those. And then also we've been meeting with the Department of Transportation and a number of the city, both at the city level and the state level, to look at the York Road corridor. When I ran for Senate 4 years ago, it was my hope that we'd be able to focus and double down in looking at York Road from North Avenue to the county line, and to really focus in restoring that and building it out. We've done some. COVID, the last 3 years of COVID has gotten in the way of a lot of the things that we wanted to do, but look forward to, we believe, much more investments and supporting, what I believe is the backbone of the city, is that York Road corridor that goes right through our district. It splits the city. It has to be from top to bottom, and now I represent York Road going all the way up to 695. So so from North Avenue to 695 along York Road, I am the senator for that full area. So the delegates on both sides, we will be focused very much on ensuring that that's the type of economic and transportation and recreational corridor that we know it can be. Any sort of, I guess, final comments, Delegate Boyce and Delegate Embry? Yeah, this has been great.
I certainly don't want to keep everybody, but thank you for a great community conversation. We look forward to being the strongest, baddest, all-women team in the General Assembly. We're excited to work not only for you, but with you. And please don't forget to follow us, contact us, and so that we can, work as one team.
Yes.
Yeah, and thank you. And I think we are the only all-women team going into this new session, so that's pretty exciting. Yeah, I just thank you. I took a lot of notes, and I please don't hesitate. I'm very much in the process of developing my agenda, so I very much welcome ideas, and this has been enormously helpful. Thank you.
All right then. All right, everyone. Again, thank you so much for being here. You are a wonderful group of people. You do so much to make our communities and our states better. So have a great night. Have a good holiday. Happy for second night of Hanukkah. And then Christmas is coming up. Yeah, we lit our candles last night. I'm going to be a little late lighting the candle tonight. But then the new year. Okay. This is the end of our meeting. Bye. Thank you, everybody who joined us on Facebook and on YouTube. We look forward to seeing you again.
Great. Hey, hey, Mary, one
Hello.
question.
Oh,
One
yeah,
question.
yeah.
But can you send me a copy of the lemon law, the vehicles lemon law?
You want to, yes, I will definitely reach out to you on that. Yep.
All right, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
Sure. Any burning desires? Any more burning desires?
I have a whole lot of burning desires, but I'm gonna keep them to myself. You know how I am. Once I see something, especially something dealing with the school system, but we'll talk later. Thank you so much.
No problem. Just feel
Okay.
free to call me. You have my number.
I have it. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Okay, anyone else? Okay, I think we can close the meeting. Good night, everyone.
Hi, Liz.